for me. And yeah.
So 3 years ago, I received a call from a marketing manager from an organization that about half the people in this room will purchase something from. And he was telling me that his online community was struggling. He had been trying everything that he could, but it wasn't really taken off. And so we agreed a fee, and I flew out to see him and find out what was going on with his online community efforts. And when I got there, he was telling me that so far he had tried everything he could, and all he could get were little blips of activity at a time. All he could get was a community to have a short spike of activity, and then a decline that kept on going and going. And he was getting quite worried about this because he had spent half of his budget already on the community, which kind of begged the question, how much is your budget? And I asked him this question, and he told me, well, before I tell you, how much money do you think it takes to develop a branded online community? So raise your hand if you think, including all the staff expenses, all of the platform and everything else, raise your hand if you think you can do it in £50,000 or less. Raise your hand if you think you need 50 to 100,000. This is really interesting. 100 to 500,000. 500,000 to a million? You guys can get my business cards on. So imagine my surprise. Well, there's no right answer to that, by the way. I mean, it depends on a million things, as we all know. But imagine my surprise when he told me that his budget for developing the online community was a grand total of $4 million. Now, this isn't just $4 million. It says $4 million in the middle of a recession. How do you get $4 million in the middle of a recession? It's kind of be like the Jedi Master of internal negotiations. But that's not the more interesting question. The more interesting question is, if you've got $4 million and you've already spent $2 million of it, where has that money gone? And so I asked him this question, and he was kind enough to tell me, and it was enlightening. So he had spent a high six-figure budget developing the community platform. So this was the most feature-rich community platform you can possibly imagine. So this platform had login, online collaboration, file sharing, tagging, seamless social media integration, wikis, and pretty much every feature you can possibly imagine from a community platform. He'd also hired a small team of community managers to help get the community going and get it off the ground. He had hired a PR company here in London, which I won't mention because I'm scared one of you might work for them. He had hired a PR company in London to get the community also off the ground, to promote it, to get it in magazines, to get it featured on blogs, which they had done quite well. He had had a marketing company to help with the branding, and ideation company. Have any of you heard of an ideation company? Is this the new thing that I've noticed? To come up with the idea of the community. And so he'd spent an awful lot of money on the community. My favorite one of these, by the way, was he'd spent 90,000 US already on legal fees for the community. And this is $90,000 before he'd even launched the community, before he'd even had a chance to get sued. Can anyone guess what that 90,000 was spent on? It was spent on, you're allowed to guess, just shout out.
Technology.
No.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, the terms and conditions, a 91-page terms and conditions from the leading law firm, I think in the world, or at least in the USA. No one would ever read it, $90,000. And what was the result of all this expenditure? What was the outcome? Well, they spent $2 million. As a result, mostly of the PR company, they got 70,000 people to join the community. And then, judging by what they had in the previous 2 weeks, they had 13 people participating. $2 million, 70,000 members that had joined, and 13 people participating. Now, I'll tell you a story, not to make fun of this organization that much, but mostly because the way this organization approached developing an online community is the way that a lot of organizations are approaching online communities. For most organizations, or for this organization anyway, nothing they have done in the past had prepared them for developing an online community today. They had no frame of reference for developing a branded online community. They saw developing an online community as a marketing activity, as a traditional marketing activity, and not a traditional community activity. And this isn't a semantic difference here. At times, the two are completely opposite of each other. And this is in a situation that a lot of organizations are facing where they don't understand that branded online communities isn't another marketing activity. It's not a case where you get a large amount of attention for a short amount of time. And in fact, it has much more in common with more traditional community building. And this is a big problem because right now, there are too many organizations that are struggling to get their community off the ground. One of the biggest problems we have right now is that most branded online communities are ghost towns. One of the things we don't talk much about is that most branded online communities fail. And they fail for a variety of reasons and a variety of situations, but there is a rampant success bias, where we only hear about the online communities that succeed. What we don't see is that for every community that succeeds, there are many more communities that fail. Quick question, so raise your hand if you participate in a branded online community that isn't your own. About a third, I think? Maybe a third. And that's actually much higher than the response that I typically get here. And I guess that's because you're online marketers, so I guess you're more involved in it. But it's usually about 5 or 10 people in the audience that raise their hands. I'll be out of 100, out of 200. And it's insane that so few people participate in branded online communities. And it's not hard to find examples of branded online communities that have failed. But this isn't an issue that I'm making up. Back in 2008, the Wall Street Journal wrote about the tribalization of business study. And it's one of the first studies that actually looked at or surveyed how many online communities are succeeding right now. And one of the things that they discovered, the headline statistic, is that 90% of branded online communities have less than 100 active members. We're not talking about registered members here. We're not talking about people that are signing up to the platform. But in terms of people actually participating, 90% of branded online communities have less than 100 active members. That means for every one successful community there, 9 want to fail. And even success is only more than 100 active members. And I'm sure for most of us, we would want much more than that, right? And it's not hard to find many, many examples of branded online communities that have failed. You just have to find them before they're taken down. So, quick lesson here. So, one of my favorite communities in the world is GenerationBenz.com. So, GenerationBenz.com is a community for people that might own Mercedes-Benz in the future. It's a community that was developed a while ago and hasn't really taken off. Doesn't it sound like a dumb idea to build a community for people that can't buy your product or service yet? So we have Metro Train by British Airways as well. Were any of you involved in this community? Because there was a very large marketing agency in London involved with it, so I'm a little bit worried about using this as an example. I think we're good. Virgin Media Pioneers. So Virgin Media teamed up with Enterprise UK to build an online community for people in the UK that wanted to build companies. And they threw all their resources at it. They had Richard Branson involved, they had people from the Dragon's Den involved, various contest winners. They did a big promotional push. And there's so many branded online communities that take this sort of approach, and they still can't get it off the ground. Why do so many branded online communities that have all the resources in the world still struggle to make their online community a success? So, my key message from this talk today, and what I'm going to try and cover in the next 15 minutes, is that we need a radical rethink in how we approach online communities. Because it's very clear right now that the approach that we're taking isn't working well enough. Too often we're using a marketing approach when we should be using a community-led approach. And there's an approach, the community-led approach, that we know works much better, that costs far less money, that it's far more effective. It takes a little longer to be a success, but we know it's an approach that works very, very well. So we want to change your approach to developing online communities. I'm sorry I had to keep walking back here, by the way. I blame Gus. So the first thing I guess I want to cover is, why does this approach not work? Why do branded online communities fail? And the reason so many online communities fail, I think it's because they're faced with what we can best describe as the Coca-Cola dilemma. So, how many of you participate in a community for your soft drink that you purchase? so glad that none of you put your hands up. But this is actually to make a point that a lot of branded online communities, they have the Coca-Cola dilemma, where they have people that might have a lot of customers, they might have people that are very loyal buyers of what they do or what they sell. They might have people that like them a lot, but they don't want to spend their spare time talking about them. They don't want to spend their spare time interacting with other people that buy the same product and service. Because when you buy a can of Coca-Cola, you don't feel much in common with someone else buying a can of Coca-Cola. If you're buying an ancient samurai sword, perhaps, but a can of Coca-Cola, not so much. And again, this isn't a problem I'm making up. This is a very real thing. And I got the name from what Coca-Cola literally tried to do. So back in 2008, they tried to launch an online community called The Yard around Sprout. Now, sadly, they took the community down before I could get a screenshot, but you can still find the press release, and it is terrific. Let me read this. The Coca-Cola Company is redefining the relationship between consumers and their sparkling beverages with the launch of the Sprite Yard, a real-time digital, on-the-go community that provides social connections and downloadable content via their mobile phones anytime, anywhere. Not only is that an insanely long sentence and complete gibberish, it's a completely bad concept. How many of you have a relationship with your sparkling beverage? I highlighted that just in case. But most organizations do this, and it sounds like the most obvious thing in the world, that the reason most online communities fail right now is because they're faced with the Coca-Cola dilemma. They don't build their community around something that has a chance of success. So it's not a surprise that efforts like this tend to fail. And if you want to instantly make your chances of success much higher than what they are now, the single best thing that you can do is pinpoint the strong common interest that your audience has. And that might not necessarily be about you. It has to be something that's of interest to them. If you can pinpoint where that strong common interest is, your chances of developing a successful online community are much, much higher. So usually strong common interest would be something that we spend a lot of time on, something we spend a lot of money on, something that we're emotionally invested with. So some example with time. So you find that online communities in some sectors are far more successful than they are in other sectors. So you get a lot of communities based around hobbies, jobs, travel, and media. You get a lot of communities in these areas because these are the things that we spend a lot of time on, especially as a percentage of our leisure time. And it's a lot easier to build a community around things we spend a lot of time on. Another good example. So Element 414 is a good community that anyone building a branded online community can learn something from, I think. The screenshot didn't come out that well, but trust me, it's a terrific online community. This was a community developed by Newark for design engineers. And the brilliance of what they did is that they didn't build a community around their products or services or what they sell. They built an online community around design engineers. They talked about what design engineers are interested in. They helped design engineers get much better at what they do. They provided the resources, the advice, and the support. They helped design engineers be much better. And as a result, not only did they attract their customers to the community, they also attracted the customers of their rivals to their community because it wasn't just about their products and services. Another great example I love is Homebase. So Homebase, again, this is kind of a no-brainer for a successful online community. They didn't build an online community around their lawnmowers or hose pipes or whether, I don't do any gardening, but whatever it is they sell at Homebase. They built an online community about getting into gardening, how you take your first steps in there. They looked at who their audience were and identified specifically a strong common interest that their audience had with each other. Another one, Inkpot from HarperCollins, I think. So Inkpot was another great online community. It's a community for young teenage readers of their books. And the brilliance of what they did is that they could have built an online community around their books, but they decided not to. They looked at what their audience are, they looked at what they were interested in, and what they found is that many of their audience also want to write books as well. So instead of developing a typical online community, telling people what the latest books are that might be coming out, they built an online community about writing your own short stories, sharing them with the community, getting feedback from other people in the community. And if it's really good, then they publish the book. This is a terrific approach to an online community. It pinpoints exactly what your audience is interested in. So, the other thing I mentioned was money. It's a lot easier to build an online community around things that we spend a lot of money on. or at least spend a lot of money on in comparison with other products in that range. So it's a lot easier to build an online community around, say, expensive wines rather than the cheap stuff that you get at Tesco's, for example. So it's a lot easier to build communities around cars and holidays and homes and investments. You see a lot of communities in these sectors. You don't see that many successful online communities for, say, the commodity products. You don't see many successful communities around Coca-Cola or toilet paper, at least I hope not. But the products that are relatively cheap is much harder to build a community around. So you can see it's very easy to find a lot of successful online communities around Ferraris or Mercedes or other cars or other expensive products and services. And finally, emotions and identity. It's a lot easier to build an online community around things that we are not emotionally engaged with, or that represent us, or represent our identity in some way. So Girl Space is a difficult community to talk about in front of an audience of 400 people. But what it is, it's an online community from Kotex about their female hygiene products. But it isn't a community about that. It's a community, they looked at what their audience were interested in, they looked at what girls are really find most difficult, most challenging, and they built a community around giving girls advice when they are on their period. I told you it's been awkward to talk about 400 people. But if you actually look at the discussions that are taking place, they're actually really quality discussions. They provide a great place for help and support for people that they're trying to reach. They pinpointed what that strong common interest is. And if you can do this, you have a much higher chance of building a successful online community. And the discussions are really intelligent, they're really supportive, they really help people in interesting times, I guess. So it's also easier to build a community around, say, whiskey compared to Coca-Cola. Because with expensive whiskey, people have a stronger sense of connection with each other. They have a stronger sense that, hey, this person might be a little more like me. It's a lot easier to build a community around things that represent our identity. So if you're, say, a misguided Man United supporter, it's a lot easier to build a community around these misguided, unfortunate individuals. And this is also true with a lot of non-profit online communities as well. You see a lot of successful online communities for, say, cancer support with non-profits, because they represent our identity in some way. And what you don't want to do is build an online community that is stuck in the middle of these three. So if you build a community around something that we don't spend a lot of money on, that we don't spend a lot of time on, that we're not emotionally invested in, then it's very difficult to develop a successful online community. If your product or service doesn't fit in one of these 4 boxes, and it doesn't have to be one of the examples, but if it doesn't fit in one of these 4 boxes, I'll share the slide afterwards. But if it doesn't fit in one of these, it's going to be very difficult to build a community around it. And that presents a dilemma for a lot of organizations. How do you build an online community if you don't fit into one of these? Well, there are some solutions here. One of the best ones is to build a community around what that strong common interest is. So what we typically do, if an organization phones up and asks for our help in developing a community, we'll interview the people that we're trying to reach. So the very first thing we'll do is build up a list of 50 or 100 people that they're trying to reach and interview them. We'll ask them 3 specific questions. The first is, how did they get involved or interested in that topic? The second is, what are their biggest challenges or the biggest problems that they face? And the third is, what are their hopes and aspirations? And we look for what the common theme is between there. What do people feel most strongly about? And we build a community around that. But it's in this area, it's very easy to build a community around something that is in these fields. So you can reposition what you're trying to do from something that's not expensive or not time intensive to something that's develops more of an emotional reaction, or has a better representative nature of what we are. And I know for most of you, this must be really obvious. This must be saying that you know already, but it's still amazing how many organizations get this wrong. It's still amazing how many organizations still try to build a community around products and services that we like, that we might buy, but we don't want to spend our spare time talking about. The other big issue we tend to come up against, the second biggest problem when it comes to building an online community, is organizations repeatedly fall victim to what we can best describe as a big launch syndrome. Which is to say that organizations repeatedly try and launch a community with a really big launch. So they'll do what the organization we worked with at the beginning of this talk did. They'll hire a PR company, they'll have a big launch, they'll try and get 60,000 or 70,000 members to join the community in a relatively short amount of time. And that would be terrific if it worked, but it doesn't work. And that's the problem we find, and you can check this for yourself. So go to any free PR distribution, press release distribution site, or the websites of, say, Marketing Week or PR Week, or any company like that, and search for the term launches an online community for brackets. And you'll find a list of organizations that have announced the launch of their online community. And look how successful they are. And you'll find that about 10% of those communities actually have any meaningful activity whatsoever. Successful online communities aren't launched with a press release. They have an entirely different approach. And if you're doing a big launch, you're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort and set really high expectations around something that probably won't succeed. But luckily, there's an entirely different approach you can take that's more in line with more traditional community building principles. And that approach is to start small. So the way we would recommend that you approach any online community is to start small. Build up a list of 50 to 100 individuals that you can reach out to. So what we typically do is that we build up a list of, say, 50 to 100 or 150 individuals that the organization has had some sort of contact with. And then we interview them. We ask them the three questions I mentioned a minute ago, and then we invite them to join a very simple mailing list. And when they're on that list, we start regular discussions. We try to get them to interact with each other. First we invite 10 people to join, then another 10, then another 10. We gradually build up momentum. And we get to find out if the community is taken up. We get to find out how easy it is to get these people to interact with us. We get to find out what sort of discussions work best, what people are most interested in. What types of discussions tend to get the biggest response, tend to get the emotional response. And gradually this grows and grows and grows. And then once we have sustained that activity, once we've got, say, 100 members or 150 active members, by the way, by that stage, we're already doing better than 90% of the online communities that try. 90% of organizations that try to develop an online community. And when we get to that stage, then we might consider developing a new platform and moving the community across, because we only want to develop a community platform when there's a community to use it. So the best thing you can do right now is to start small. Get your first members to join, get them gradually joining and participating, start those regular discussions, get members participating, and gradually grow from there. As I mentioned, the biggest mistake that organizations make is trying to have a big launch. And if they don't have a big launch, then they try to grow too quickly. Every big online community begins as a small online community. And you can go to archive.org and look at the history of any successful online community you like. And what you will usually find is that it begins as a very small online community. So if you want to develop a successful online community, you have to start small and steadily grow big. So by steadily grow big, we mean continually inviting people to join and participate. What you don't want is an explosion of people visiting your platform. For starters, it's very hard to convert that traffic into active participants. If you have 2,000 people that visit your online community tomorrow, how are you going to convert all of them into regular members? And if you can't do that, then you're wasting the potential of a lot of potential members in your community. So if you can't convert them into active members, if you can't greet them into the community, if you can't get them involved in discussions they might be interested in, if you can't introduce them to other people in the community, if you can't find things that they want to participate in, if you can't give them personal attention, then it's going to be very difficult to make any or seize the opportunity of these potential members. And the other big issue here is that if a lot of members are joining your community in a short amount of time, it can crush the existing community you've had. So imagine you're participating in an online community with 300 people that are active. You've been there for a few months, and you know that most of them are quite active and they participate, and you know most members by name. In a matter of within 2 or 3 days, it's flooded by people that you don't know, who are talking about discussions that have been talked about over and over again before, with no history or no whole culture of what you did. It can drive away a lot of people that would be participating in your community. The other big mistake I'm finding organizations tend to make is that they make the community about them and not about the community. And this is different from what I discussed originally. Let me give you an example. So one of my clients is the BMJ, the British Medical Journal. They have a community called Dr. Doc. And this is an online community for doctors to talk to each other and interact with each other. One of the situations we found with Dr. Doc is that the BMJ wanted them to discuss patient safety. They wanted them to discuss making better healthcare decisions. They wanted them to discuss how you be a much better doctor than what you are now. They wanted the really serious discussions. But the problem was that doctors didn't particularly want to spend all their time talking about that. And the BMJ, by clamping down on these sorts of discussions, were limiting the growth of the community. And what we found is that when we allowed these discussions, when we encouraged the off-topic discussions, when we encouraged discussions about anything they wanted to talk about, they built relationships with each other. They started coming back and participating more frequently than what they were originally. And as a result of that, the level of serious discussions that they wanted started going up as well. So they still got an increase in what they wanted, but they had to accept that the community wasn't just going to be about that. It's not going to be just about them. It's going to be about members building relationships with each other. It's going to be about members interacting, they feel like they know each other. It's going to be a place where members can vent or talk about anything they want to talk about because they've built these relationships with these individuals. So there are many ways you can build a community that is about the community. So one of the things you can do is you have a content page in most online communities. Treat that content page as a local newspaper for the community. Interview your members, talk about the milestones that your members have achieved. Talk about upcoming events. If 2 of your members get married, then write about it because it brings the community together. Imagine it's a local newspaper talking about what's going on in the community. Because if you do this, it really helps foster a very strong sense of community amongst your members. So there are a variety of other things you can do to make the community about the community. So besides encouraging off-topic discussions or getting people to interact about things they like, you can also host regular events for the community. You can also create things that the community is going to be interested in. You can also talk about what's coming up in the community. So some examples. So The Economist has something quite interesting. They do a regular weekly debate. And they get members to start on a Monday. They pick a major issue in that field, a major topic that's quite contentious. And then they use that as a regular debate. And throughout the week, people can post rebuttals, they can vote where they are, they can post more information. And it's a good way to stimulate activity and get people coming back and being involved. It's one of the very simple things that they can do. Mashable also does a fairly good job for a content site of building their community. They have the top 6 comments of the week, they recognize what members are doing, they give members a lot of opportunity to shine. They also organize a lot of regular events. I won't go over this again, but it's covered in the last talk. And the final thing is to use simple technology. Too many organizations are spending too much money on expensive community platforms. 2 weeks ago, I met with an organization that had hired Lithium as their community platform provider. Do you guys know Lithium at all? Basically, it's an enterprise-level community platform, and the fees are between, I think, 5 to 6 figures a year. So this organization was spending over 100 grand a year on their online community platform. And when I went there, their community wasn't taken off. They just started. They couldn't get that many members participating. And they had 2 interns that were working part-time that were responsible for their community. And I said, well, obviously you have to hire a full-time community manager. And they couldn't because they didn't have the money. Too many organizations are spending too much money on the platform and not enough on the people that manage it. You should always be spending more on the staff that are going to manage the community and manage the platform than the platform itself. One of the biggest problems we have is that you shouldn't be spending a lot of money on a community platform, especially when there's so many free and terrific alternatives right now. Right now, I think we're pretty much entering the golden age of community platforms. We have so many platforms that are out there now that we know work, that we know can succeed. The most expensive platforms aren't the best platforms. The newest platforms aren't necessarily better than the old platforms we used to have. Most of the successful online communities I can think of right now are still based around simple platforms. If you go to big-boards.com, for example, you can find the biggest online communities in the world, and they're all based on simple forum software. You can find communities that have over 1 billion posts, and they're still based on simple forum software. So you don't have to use a very expensive platform. When you launch a community, I strongly recommend that you pick a really simple platform. By the way, the community for community managers in the UK, EMIT, is based upon a simple mailing list. It works, it's efficient, it's not used, you don't need anything else. So just think about that. There are different platforms that are available out there. So forums and mailing lists work perfectly well. You have white label platforms like Ning and SocialGo and a few other providers in that space who have developed this platform where you can just drag and drop what you want. Too many organizations are spending too much money on the platform. And at the very most, you can use open source platforms like Drupal and Joomla, and a variety of options you have there to develop your community. But you shouldn't be spending your whole budget on the community platform, because there are so many better uses for it. And finally, we do a community management course, which if you want to take is pillarsummit.com, and closes on September 24th. And because we love you guys so much, and you've been such a great audience, if you go to pillarsummit.com/OMN, we put together a lot of free community management resources. You can have free lessons, free PDF, a free book, so a lot of resources there. And I'm pretty certain I'm way out of time, but if you have any questions, let me know.